I'm Erica Sutton, 32, and literally last weekend, my rep as the family glue? Yeah, it totally backfired. The piece I'd worked my butt off to keep solid for my son Evan and me, it blew up into a full-on family meltdown at our so-called happy reunion. My parents, with their perfect public image, and my sister Lexi, the golden child, straight up demanded I let them discipline Evan their way. And when I clapped back, the room went dead silent. "You're tearing this family apart," my mother yelled, with everyone staring like I'd just set the table on fire. But here's the tea. Their cruelty didn't break me, it lit a spark. I'm not just pushing back, I'm about to flip the script and change everything. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, hit subscribe, and stay with me for the most satisfying revenge you'll ever hear. Looking back, it's almost unreal what I'd do once that fire in me roared to life. I stood in the middle of my parents' pristine living room, the one they'd spent years curating to scream perfect family to anyone who walked in. The crystal chandelier gleamed above, catching the late afternoon light, and the air smelled faintly of lavender from Mom's overpriced diffuser. Evan, my 7-year-old, clung to my hand, his small fingers trembling as he pressed closer. His brown eyes, wide and searching, darted toward my parents, who sat stiffly on their cream leather sofa. Lexi lounged in an armchair, scrolling her phone, her lips curled in that smug way she'd mastered by high school. This was supposed to be a simple family gathering, a chance to reconnect, as Dad had put it in his overly formal email. But the tension in the room was thicker than the August heat outside. "Erica, you're late," Mom said, her voice clipped, her manicured nails tapping the armrest. She didn't look at Evan, not once. That stung more than her words. I squeezed Evan's hand, feeling his pulse quicken. "Traffic," I muttered, though we both knew I'd stalled leaving the house, dreading this exact moment. I'd spent years playing peacemaker, swallowing their barbs, nodding through their lectures about how I was too soft with Evan. Single mom, no husband, no fancy degree. Those were my crimes in their eyes. But I'd kept coming back, thinking I could shield Evan from their coldness, thinking I could make them see us. Dad leaned forward, his glasses glinting. "We need to talk about Evan's behavior," he said, like my son was a problem to be fixed. Evan's shoulders hunched, and I felt my jaw tighten. "He's fine," I said, my voice sharper than I meant. Lexi snorted, not looking up from her phone. "Fine? He's a mess, Erica. You let him run wild." Her words landed like a slap, and Evan's grip on my hand tightened. I wanted to scream that he wasn't a mess. He was a kid, sensitive and bright, who loved drawing dragons and hated loud voices. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I guided Evan to the corner of the room where a small table held his sketchbook and crayons. "Draw me something cool, okay?" I whispered, brushing his dark hair from his forehead. He nodded, but his eyes were still wary. I straightened, forcing a smile for the room. "Let's just eat," I said, hoping to steer things back to neutral. Mom's lips thinned, but she stood, gesturing toward the dining room. "Fine, but we're not done discussing this." Dinner was a minefield. Every bite of Mom's overseasoned roast felt like a test. Dad kept glancing at Evan, who was quietly picking at his plate, his fork moving slowly. "Sit up straight, Evan," Dad said, his tone heavy with judgment. Evan flinched, and I saw red. "He's sitting fine," I said, my voice low but firm. Lexi rolled her eyes. "God, Erica, you're so defensive. Maybe if you disciplined him he wouldn't be so fragile." That word, fragile, cut deep. Evan wasn't fragile, he was 7, navigating a world that didn't always understand his quiet strength. Then it happened. Evan reached for his glass of water, his hand shaking just enough to tip it over. The glass hit the table with a clink, water spilling across the white tablecloth. Mom gasped like he'd shattered her heirloom china. "Evan!" she snapped, her voice sharp enough to make him freeze. "Can't you do anything right?" His face crumpled, and before I could stop him, he slid off his chair and bolted toward the living room, his small feet pounding the hardwood. I stood, my chair scraping the floor. "He's a kid, Mom. It was an accident." My heart hammered, but my voice stayed steady. Dad shook his head. "This is what we're talking about, Erica. You let him get away with everything." Lexi chimed in, her voice dripping with venom. "Maybe if you weren't such a pushover, he'd learn some manners." I looked at them, my parents with their polished lives, Lexi with her perfect Instagram grid, and felt something snap inside me. I'd spent years trying to fit into their mold, to prove I was enough. But watching Evan curl up on the couch, clutching his sketchbook like a shield, I realized I was done. I crossed the room and knelt beside him, my hand on his back. "You okay, buddy?" I whispered. He nodded, but his eyes were wet. That image, my son, hurt by their words, their indifference, burned into me. I stood facing my family who were still seated, watching me like I was the one out of line. "You don't get to talk to him like that," I said, my voice trembling with a rage I'd buried for too long. "You don't get to make him feel small." Mom's eyes narrowed. "You're making a scene, Erica. Sit down." But I didn't. For the first time, I saw them clearly, not as the family I was supposed to love, but as people who'd hurt us, over and over. I took Evan's hand, grabbed his sketchbook, and headed for the door. "We're leaving," I said, my voice steady now. Lexi laughed, a cold, cutting sound. "Good luck out there, Erica, you'll need it." As I buckled Evan into the car, his small voice broke the silence. "Are they mad at me?" My heart twisted. "No, buddy," I said, kissing his forehead. "They're mad at themselves." Driving away, I felt the weight of their words lift, replaced by a fire I hadn't known I had. They thought they could break us, but they were wrong. I wasn't just going to walk away, I was going to dismantle their perfect little world, piece by piece, for Evan's sake and mine. The car's hum faded as I pulled into our driveway, Evan asleep in the back seat, his sketchbook clutched to his chest. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, as my parents' and Lexi's words echoed in my head. Fragile, pushover, mess. Each one stung, not because they were true, but because they'd been the soundtrack of my life for years. I glanced at Evan in the rearview mirror, his small face peaceful now, and felt that fire from the dinner reignite. They didn't just dismiss me tonight, they dismissed him. And that was unforgivable. As I carried him inside, his weight warm against my shoulder, memories of my own childhood flooded back, sharp and unyielding, reminding me how long I'd been invisible to them. Growing up, I was the odd one out, the kid who'd rather read in the corner than perform for the family's endless stream of guests. Mom and Dad had their narrative. Lexi, 2 years younger, was the star. Cheerleader, prom queen, the one who could do no wrong. I was the quiet one, the sensitive one, as Mom put it, her tone always laced with disappointment. I'd pour my heart into things, science fairs, art projects, even a short story that won a school contest, but their eyes would glaze over when I tried to share. "That's nice, Erica," Dad would say, already turning to Lexi's latest cheer routine or her straight-A report card. I'd stand there, clutching my certificate or my little clay sculpture, feeling like I was shouting into a void. One memory hit harder than the rest. I was 16, and I'd spent months building a model rocket for a regional competition. I'd stayed up late, gluing fins, calculating trajectories, dreaming of making Mom and Dad proud. When I won first place, I rushed home, trophy in hand, grinning so wide it hurt. I found them in the living room, fawning over Lexi's new cheer uniform, all sparkles and bright red pom-poms. "Look," I said, holding up the trophy, my voice shaking with excitement. Mom barely glanced up. "Oh, that's cute, Erica. Lexi, show us that new routine again." My chest tightened, and I set the trophy on the counter, where it sat untouched until I packed it away for college. Lexi noticed, though. She smirked, flipping her hair, and said, "Maybe if you tried something normal, they'd care." That pattern never stopped. In my 20s, I worked 2 jobs to put myself through community college, studying child psychology because I wanted to understand kids like Evan, kids who felt things deeply. I graduated with honors, but when I called to tell them, Dad said, "Good job, but Lexi just got engaged, so we're a bit busy." Lexi's engagement party was a spectacle, caterers, a string quartet, Mom posting every detail on social media. I was there, smiling, helping with the guest list, because that's what I did. I kept the peace, but when I mentioned my degree, Mom waved it off. "You'll settle down eventually, Erica. Focus on finding a husband." I swallowed the hurt, like always, and went back to my life, building a world for Evan and me. Evan was my turning point. From the moment he was born, I saw myself in him, his quiet curiosity, his love for drawing, the way he'd hide behind me when voices got loud. I swore he'd never feel invisible. But my family didn't see him that way. They'd criticize his shyness, his weird obsession with dragons, his refusal to toughen up. Once, at a family barbecue when Evan was 5, Lexi snapped at him for spilling juice on her dress. "God, Erica, control your kid," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Evan froze, his eyes welling up, and I knelt beside him, wiping his hands, whispering, "It's okay, buddy." But it wasn't. Mom pulled me aside later, saying, "You're raising him to be too soft, he needs discipline, not coddling." I nodded, biting my tongue, because arguing felt pointless. Back in the present, I tucked Evan into bed, his sketchbook open to a half-finished dragon, all fierce lines and bright greens. I sat on the edge of his bed, my fingers tracing the drawing, and felt a familiar ache. I'd spent my life trying to earn their approval, thinking if I was good enough, quiet enough, helpful enough, they'd see me. See us. But tonight at that dinner I saw the truth, they never would. Their love was conditional, and Evan and I didn't fit their conditions. My hands shook as I closed his sketchbook, the weight of those years pressing down. I'd been invisible to them, but I wasn't powerless. I went to my desk, pulling out a notebook I'd kept hidden for months. Inside were pages of notes, dates, quotes, screenshots of Lexi's perfect family posts, Mom's charity gala speeches, Dad's sanctimonious emails, evidence of their hypocrisy, their cruelty, their carefully crafted lies. I'd started it after Evan came home crying from a visit with them last year, when Lexi had mocked his stutter in front of her friends. That was the moment I stopped hoping for change and started planning. I wasn't just going to walk away from them. I was going to expose them, strip away their facade, and build a new life for Evan and me, one where he'd never feel small again. As I flipped through the notebook, my phone buzzed, a text from Lexi. "You embarrassed us tonight. Don't expect an invite next time." I stared at it, my thumb hovering over the screen. A year ago, I'd have apologized, smoothed things over. But now, I set the phone down, my heart steady. She thought she'd won, but she didn't know what was coming. I leaned back, the notebook open in my lap, and felt that fire grow. They'd spent years ignoring me, but they wouldn't ignore me now. Not when I was done playing their game. I closed the notebook, my fingers lingering on its worn cover, and leaned back in my chair, the quiet of the house wrapping around me. Evan's soft snores drifted from his room, a reminder of why I'd started this in the first place. That fire from the dinner still burned, but it wasn't just anger. It was clarity. For months, I'd been building something in secret, a plan to tear down my family's lies and protect Evan from their poison. It started as a flicker of defiance after Lexi's cruelty at that barbecue, but it had grown into something unstoppable. Sitting there, staring at the notebook, I remembered the grueling nights, the endless hours, and the moment I realized I could actually do this. It began a year ago after Evan came home from my parents' house, his eyes red from crying. Lexi had invited her friends over, and when Evan stumbled over his words trying to tell a story about his dragon drawings, she'd laughed. "Spit it out, kid," she'd said, her friends snickering behind her. Evan had frozen, then ran to hide in the guest room. When I picked him up, he wouldn't look at me, just clutched his sketchbook and whispered, "I'm not good at talking." My heart broke. But it also woke something up. I'd spent years absorbing their jabs, but seeing Evan shrink under their cruelty was different. That night as he slept, I sat at my kitchen table, a single lamp casting shadows, and started writing. Every slight, every dismissive comment, every time they'd made us feel less than, I wrote it all down. At first it was just a way to process the hurt, but then I noticed patterns. Mom's charity galas, where she'd smile for cameras while ignoring Evan's drawings of dragons she claimed to love. Dad's lectures about family values in his emails, while he brushed off Evan's questions about stars or bugs. Lexi's Instagram, a curated shrine to her perfect life, never mentioning the sister or nephew she belittled in private. They'd built a public image of kindness and success, but it was a lie, and I was done letting it stand. I started digging deeper, collecting proof, screenshots of Lexi's posts, recordings of Mom's backhanded compliments, even emails where Dad dismissed my concerns about Evan's well-being. It wasn't enough to walk away. I needed to expose them. The real breakthrough came 6 months ago. I'd been working late, Evan asleep, when I stumbled across an old article about Mom's charity. It praised her as a pillar of the community, but the numbers didn't add up. Donations were high, but the actual impact, school supplies for kids, meals for families, was minimal. I started cross-referencing public records, financial reports, anything I could find. My psychology training helped. I knew how to read people even through numbers. There were discrepancies, funds unaccounted for, and I realized Mom's charity was more about her image than helping anyone. I saved every document, every receipt, building a case that could unravel her reputation. But it wasn't just about Mom. Lexi's perfect life was a house of cards, too. Her influencer career thrived on brand deals, but I found posts where she'd lied about partnerships, claiming she used products she'd never touched. I tracked down comments from followers she'd blocked for asking questions, saving their screenshots. Dad was trickier. He was careful, always cloaked in his upstanding citizen vibe, but I found emails where he'd pressured colleagues to cover for Mom's charity at work events. It was a web of lies, and I was mapping it piece by piece. The hardest part wasn't the research, it was the nights I doubted myself. I'd sit at my desk, papers spread out, my eyes burning from hours of reading fine print. Was I crazy? Was I going too far? My hands would shake as I typed, imagining confronting them, imagining their faces when their perfect world crumbled. But then I'd look at Evan's drawings pinned to the wall, dragons soaring free and fierce, and I'd keep going. This wasn't just for me. It was for him, so he'd never feel small again. By last month I had enough. A dossier, thick with evidence, financial records, screenshots, recordings, even a timeline of their cruelty toward Evan and me. I'd connected with a local journalist, someone I'd met through a parenting group, who was hungry for a story about community pillars, who weren't what they seemed. I didn't send her anything yet, I needed the right moment, but the plan was real, and it was mine. I'd spent years feeling powerless, but this was power. Not the loud, flashy kind Lexi chased, but the quiet, unstoppable kind that could change everything. I stood, stretching my stiff shoulders, and glanced at the clock. 2 a.m. The house was silent, but my mind buzzed. Tomorrow was the annual family dinner, the one I'd been dreading for weeks. They'd invited me, probably expecting me to play the good daughter again, to sit quietly while they tore into Evan and me. But I wasn't that Erica anymore. I tucked the notebook into a locked drawer, my fingers steady now. They thought they knew me, thought I'd stay silent, keep the peace. They had no idea what was coming. As I climbed into bed, I pictured Evan's face at the dinner, the way he'd flinched when Mom snapped. That image fueled me. I wasn't just going to expose them, I was going to rewrite our story. Evan deserved a legacy where he was seen, loved, celebrated, not judged. And I was going to make it happen, no matter what it took. The morning of the annual family dinner, I stood in my kitchen, coffee mug warm in my hands, staring at the calendar pinned to the fridge. The date was circled in red, a glaring reminder of the obligation I'd been dreading for weeks. Evan sat at the table, munching cereal, his sketchbook open to a new dragon, this one with wings spread wide, flames curling from its mouth. "It's for you, Mom," he said, his voice soft but proud. I smiled, ruffling his hair, but my stomach churned. Tonight, I'd walk into the lion's den, my parents' house where every word and glance was a weapon. My notebook, locked in its drawer, held the power to dismantle their world, but I wasn't ready to use it yet. I needed to face them first, to see if they'd push me one step too far. I sipped my coffee, the bitterness grounding me as I replayed last night's resolve. The dossier was complete. Pages of evidence that could ruin Mom's charity, Lexi's influencer status, Dad's reputation. I'd even drafted an email to the journalist, ready to send when the moment was right. But today wasn't about that. It was about surviving the dinner, keeping Evan safe, and holding my ground. I glanced at him, his small fingers gripping a red crayon, and felt a pang. He didn't know about my plan, only that I'd promised to protect him. That promise was my anchor. "Ready for school, buddy?" I asked, forcing a lightness I didn't feel. Evan nodded, sliding his sketchbook into his backpack. As we drove to his school, he chatted about his dragon, how it could fly faster than a jet. I listened, nodding, but my mind was already at the dinner table, anticipating Mom's tight-lipped smile, Dad's lectures, Lexi's smirks. I'd been through it before, but this time felt different. The fire from last weekend's fight hadn't faded. It had grown, fueled by every memory of their cruelty. After dropping Evan off, I headed to work, my part-time job, at a community center where I ran parenting workshops. It was a lifeline, a place where I felt seen, but today I was distracted. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. 6 p.m. sharp, don't bring Evan's mess. My jaw clenched. She meant his sketchbook, his crayons, the things that made him happy. I didn't reply, just shoved the phone into my bag. At the center, I led a workshop on building kids' confidence, but my mind kept drifting. I saw Evan's face from last weekend, the way he'd curled into himself when Mom snapped. I saw my 16-year-old self, trophy in hand, ignored. By the time the workshop ended, my hands were shaking, not with fear but with purpose. Back home, I stood in front of my closet picking an outfit for the dinner. Nothing flashy, black jeans, a simple blouse. I didn't need to impress them, I needed to survive them. Evan was staying with my neighbor, Mrs. Carter, a kind woman who let him draw for hours. "You sure you're okay?" she asked when I dropped him off, her eyes searching mine. I nodded, forcing a smile. "Just family stuff." She patted my arm and I felt a flicker of warmth. At least someone saw me. Driving to my parents' house, the familiar tree-lined street felt suffocating. Their colonial-style home loomed, all white shutters and manicured lawn, a stage for their perfect family act. I parked, my hands gripping the steering wheel as I took a deep breath. The dossier flashed in my mind. Every page, every screenshot, every recorded slight. It was my safety net, my weapon, but tonight I'd face them unarmed, just to see how far they'd go. I stepped out, the evening air cool against my skin, and walked to the door, my heart pounding but steady. Mom opened the door, her smile as practiced as ever. "Erica, you made it," she said, her tone implying I'd already failed some unspoken test. I nodded, stepping inside. The house smelled of rosemary and roasted chicken, but the warmth was surface level, like a magazine spread. Dad was in the living room, adjusting his glasses, and Lexi was on the couch, scrolling her phone, her manicured nails clicking. "No, Evan?" Lexi asked, not looking up, her voice dripping with judgment. "He's with a friend," I said, keeping my tone neutral. Mom's eyes flicked to me, then away. "Probably for the best, he's so unpredictable." I bit the inside of my cheek, feeling the fire flare. Unpredictable? He was a kid, not a problem. But I didn't argue, not yet. I followed them to the dining room where the table was set with Mom's best china, candles flickering like this was some grand occasion. Dad sat at the head, Mom to his right, Lexi across from me. I took my seat. My hands folded in my lap, every muscle tensed. This was their territory, their rules, but I wasn't the same Erica who'd nodded and smiled through their barbs. I was here to watch, to listen, to let them dig their own graves. As Mom served the chicken, her movements precise, I felt the weight of the night settle in. This dinner wasn't just a meal, it was a test. Could I keep my cool? Could I protect Evan's heart without losing mine? The dossier waited at home, a ticking bomb, but tonight I needed to face them, as they were. Cruel, dismissive, blind to the storm I was about to unleash. I picked up my fork, my grip steady, and braced myself for what was coming. The dining room felt like a stage, every clink of silverware and flicker of candlelight amplifying the tension. I sat across from Lexi, her eyes occasionally flicking up from her phone to shoot me a look that said I was already an inconvenience. Mom passed the roasted chicken, her movements deliberate, while Dad sipped his wine, his gaze heavy with the judgment I'd known my whole life. The air was thick with their unspoken expectations, and I felt like I was holding my breath, waiting for the first strike. I'd come to this dinner knowing it would be a gauntlet, but nothing prepared me for how quickly their contempt would target Evan, even in his absence. Mom broke the silence first, her voice syrupy with concern that didn't reach her eyes. "Erica, I'm glad you didn't bring Evan tonight. He's been so difficult lately." She speared a piece of asparagus, her manicured nails catching the light. I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. Difficult? Evan, who'd spent the morning drawing a dragon for me, his small face lit with pride? My throat tightened, but I kept my expression neutral, setting my fork down slowly. "He's fine, Mom," I said, my voice steady despite the heat rising in my chest. "He's just a kid," Lexi snorted, not even pretending to hide her disdain. "A kid who can't sit still or talk right," she said, scrolling her phone as if her words were casual, not cruel. My fingers curled into my palms under the table, nails digging into skin. I wanted to reach across and shake her, to make her see the hurt she caused, but I stayed still, my eyes locked on her. "He talks fine," I said, each word measured. "He's 7, he's learning." Lexi rolled her eyes, her lips curling into that familiar smirk. "Learning? He's a mess, Erica. You're not doing him any favors coddling him." Dad cleared his throat, his glasses glinting as he leaned forward. She's got a point, he said, his tone heavy, like he was delivering a verdict. Evan needs structure, discipline. You're too soft, Erica. Always have been. The words landed like a slap, echoing every lecture I'd endured growing up. Too soft. Too sensitive. Never enough. I felt my pulse in my ears, but I didn't look away. He's happy, I said, my voice low but firm. That's what matters. Mom sighed, her lips pursing. Happy doesn't mean successful, Erica. You're setting him up to fail. I glanced at the empty chair where Evan would have sat, picturing his small hands clutching his sketchbook, his eyes darting nervously. They weren't just attacking me, they were tearing into him, a 7-year-old who wasn't even here to defend himself. My chest ached, but I kept my face calm, years of practice kicking in. I'd learned to hide my hurt, to swallow their barbs, but tonight it felt different. Every word they said was another piece of kindling for the fire I'd been stoking. Lexi set her phone down, finally giving me her full attention, her eyes gleaming with malice. You know, Erica, I saw this parenting influencer on Insta. Her kid's the same age as Evan, but he's already reading at a high school level. Maybe you should take notes. She leaned back, crossing her arms, her diamond bracelet catching the candlelight. The implication was clear. I was failing Evan, and she, the childless influencer, knew better. I forced a slow breath, my hands trembling under the table. Evan's doing great in school, I said, my voice tight. He's creative, kind. Not every kid needs to be a prodigy. Mom laughed, a sharp, cutting sound. Creative? Those drawings he's always scribbling? They're a distraction, Erica. He needs to focus on real skills. She waved a hand, dismissing Evan's passion like it was nothing. I saw red, my vision narrowing. His dragons, those fierce, colorful creatures, were his way of making sense of the world, of feeling strong, and here was Mom, reducing them to a waste of time. I opened my mouth to snap back, but Dad cut in. Enough, Erica. We're just trying to help. You've always been too emotional about these things. Emotional. That word again, thrown at me like a flaw. I looked at them, Mom with her perfect posture, Dad with his stern frown, Lexi with her smug grin, and felt the weight of years spent trying to please them. I'd twisted myself into knots to fit their mold, to be the daughter they wanted, but it was never enough. And now they were doing the same to Evan, picking at him like he was a problem to be fixed. My hands unclenched, and I sat up straighter, something shifting inside me. I wasn't here to play their game anymore. The rest of the meal passed in a blur of their backhanded comments. Mom mentioned her charity gala, how important it was, while ignoring my work at the community center. Dad brought up Lexi's latest brand deal, some skincare line she barely used, as if it were a Nobel Prize. I nodded, ate, kept my responses short. But inside I was cataloging every word, every slight, adding them to the dossier in my mind. They thought they were untouchable, their perfect image airtight. They had no idea I was holding the match that could burn it all down. As dessert was served, Mom's lemon tart, too sour for my taste, Lexi leaned forward, her voice low and venomous. You should be grateful we even invite you, Erica. Most families would have given up on you by now. My fork stilled, the tart halfway to my mouth. Grateful? For their cruelty? For the way they made Evan feel small? I set the fork down, my eyes meeting hers. I don't need your invitations, I said, my voice quiet but sharp. The room went silent, the candles flickering between us. Mom's eyes narrowed, Dad's jaw tightened, but I didn't care. For the first time I felt the power I'd been building, not in their world, but in mine. The silence in the dining room was deafening, the kind that presses against your skin, heavy with unspoken accusations. My words, I don't need your invitations, hung in the air, sharp and final, like a door slamming shut. Lexi's smirk faltered, her eyes narrowing as she leaned back, her bracelet clinking against the table. Mom's fork froze mid-air, a piece of lemon tart trembling, while Dad's face hardened, his glasses catching the candlelight in a way that made him look like a judge about to deliver a sentence. I sat still, my hands steady in my lap, but inside, my heart pounded. I'd crossed a line, and I knew what was coming. They'd been waiting for an excuse, and I'd just given it to them. Dad set his wineglass down with a deliberate clink, his voice low and measured, the way it always was when he wanted to sound final. Erica, we've tried to be patient, he said, folding his hands. But this attitude of yours, it's gone too far. He glanced at Mom, then Lexi, as if they'd rehearsed this. My stomach twisted, but I kept my eyes on him, refusing to look away. What attitude? I asked, my voice calm but edged like a blade hidden in velvet. Mom sighed, a theatrical sound I'd heard 1,000 times. You're ungrateful, she said, setting her fork down. We've given you everything, support, advice, a place in this family, and you throw it back in our faces. Lexi jumped in, her voice sharp, eager to twist the knife. You act like we're the problem, Erica, but look at you. Single mom, barely scraping by, raising a kid who's, let's be honest, a burden. That word burden hit like a punch to the chest. Evan, my Evan, with his bright eyes and dragon drawings, a burden? My nails dug into my palms, but I didn't flinch. I pictured him at Mrs. Carter's, safe, drawing, unaware of the venom being spilled here. That image kept me grounded. Kept me from exploding. Evan's not a burden, I said, my voice low, each word deliberate. He's my son, and he's perfect. Lexi rolled her eyes, but Dad cut her off with a raised hand. Enough, he said, his tone final. We've discussed this, Erica. You're not capable of raising him properly, and it's affecting the family. We've decided it's best if you're no longer part of it. The words landed like a guillotine, cold and absolute. Disowned. They were disowning me. And Evan. My breath caught, but I didn't let it show. I leaned back, my eyes moving from Dad's stern face to Mom's tight-lipped nod to Lexi's smug satisfaction. Disowned? I repeated, testing the word, letting it hang between us. Mom nodded, her hands smoothing the tablecloth as if this was just another item on her to-do list. It's for the best, she said. You've chosen your path, Erica. We can't keep cleaning up your messes. Messes? I wanted to laugh, a bitter, jagged sound. My messes were working 2 jobs to support Evan, staying up late to help him with homework, building a life where he felt safe. Their messes were the lies they told the world, the cruelty they hid behind their perfect facade. Lexi leaned forward, her voice dripping with false pity. You'll be fine, Erica. Maybe now you can focus on fixing yourself. And Evan. She smiled, a predator's smile, and I saw red. My hands trembled, not with fear, but with a rage so fierce it felt like it could burn the room down. But I didn't scream. I didn't throw the tart in her face, though the thought crossed my mind. Instead, I stood, my chair scraping the floor, and looked at each of them in turn. You think you're cutting me off, I said, my voice steady, but you're the ones who've been holding me back. Dad's jaw tightened, and Mom gasped, her hand flying to her chest like I'd insulted her precious gala. How dare you, she hissed, after everything we've done for you. I almost laughed then, the absurdity of it hitting me. Done for me? They'd ignored me, belittled me, hurt my son. But I didn't argue. I didn't need to. The dossier at home, pages of their lies, their hypocrisy, was my answer. I wasn't here to beg for their approval anymore. I was here to let them bury themselves. I grabbed my purse, my movements slow, deliberate. You've made your choice, I said, my eyes locking on Dad's. So have I. Lexi scoffed, muttering something about drama, but I ignored her. I walked to the door, my heels clicking on the hardwood, each step feeling lighter than the last. As I reached for the handle, Mom called out, You're making a mistake, Erica. You'll regret this. I paused, my hand on the knob, and looked back. The only mistake I made was thinking you'd ever see us. Then I walked out, the door closing behind me with a soft thud. Outside, the night air was cool, and I stood on their perfect lawn, my breath visible in the chill. My heart raced, but not with fear, with freedom. They thought they'd broken me, cast me out like garbage. But they didn't know what I'd built, what I was capable of. The dossier waited, a ticking bomb, and I was ready to light the fuse, for Evan, for me, for the legacy we deserved. The night air was sharp against my skin as I stood on my parents' lawn, their front door still echoing in my mind with that final thud. My hands shook, not from the cold, but from the adrenaline coursing through me. They'd disowned me, cut Evan and me out like we were nothing, and for a moment I felt the weight of it, the years of trying to belong, now officially erased. But as I reached for my car keys, my phone buzzed in my purse, a sharp vibration that snapped me back. I pulled it out, the screen glowing in the dark, and saw a text from Sarah, the journalist I'd been working with. Call me now. Big news. My heart skipped. This wasn't just a coincidence, it was the moment I'd been waiting for, the spark to ignite everything I'd built. I slid into my car, the leather seat cold, and dialed Sarah's number, my fingers trembling as I held the phone to my ear. She picked up on the first ring, her voice breathless. Erica, you're not going to believe this, she said. I dug deeper into your mom's charity, cross-checked those financials you sent. It's worse than we thought. Thousands unaccounted for, funneled into personal accounts. My breath caught, my grip tightening on the phone. I'd suspected Mom's charity was a front, but hearing it confirmed, with numbers and proof, hit like a lightning bolt. There's more, Sarah continued. I found a whistleblower, someone who worked with her. They're ready to talk. This could blow up big. I leaned back, my eyes fixed on the dark street ahead, my parents' house looming in the rearview mirror. How soon can you publish? I asked, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. Sarah hesitated. I need your go-ahead, Erica. This'll ruin them. Your mom's reputation, your dad's connections, even Lexi's brand deals. You sure you're ready? I pictured Evan's face, his small body curled up after Lexi's cruelty. His voice whispering, I'm not good at talking. Then I saw Mom's fake smile, Dad's stern frown, Lexi's smirk as they declared us outcasts. I'm ready, I said. Do it. Sarah promised to draft the story and send it to me by morning. I hung up, my hand still shaking, but now with a different energy, triumph. The dossier I'd built, the months of late nights collecting evidence, had just been validated. Their perfect world was about to crumble, and I was the one holding the hammer. I started the car, the engine's hum grounding me, and drove toward Mrs. Carter's to pick up Evan. My mind raced, replaying the dinner, their words, burden, mess, ungrateful, each one now fuel for what came next. When I pulled up to Mrs. Carter's, Evan was waiting on the porch, his sketchbook tucked under his arm, a sleepy smile on his face. Did you have fun? He asked, climbing into the back seat. I glanced at him in the rearview mirror, his eyes bright despite the late hour. Not fun, I said, keeping my tone light, but important. He nodded, accepting that, and started telling me about the dragon he'd drawn for Mrs. Carter. I listened, my heart swelling, but part of me was still in that dining room, hearing their verdict, feeling the weight of their rejection lift as Sarah's words sank in. Back home I tucked Evan into bed, his dragon drawing now taped to his wall, a fierce creature with emerald scales and fiery breath. You're my hero, Mom, he mumbled, half asleep, and I kissed his forehead, my throat tight. You're mine, buddy, I whispered. In my room I opened my laptop, the dossier spread across my desk like a battle plan. I reread my notes, the screenshots, the emails, each one a piece of their hypocrisy. Mom's charity scams, Lexi's fake brand deals, Dad's pressure on colleagues to prop up their image. It was all there, and now Sarah had the final piece to make it undeniable. I leaned back, my eyes burning from the screen, and felt a strange calm settle over me. The dinner had been their last chance to show some shred of humanity, and they'd failed. They'd chosen their image over us, and now I was choosing us, Evan and me, over them. The fire I'd felt since last weekend wasn't just anger anymore, it was purpose. I wasn't just going to expose them, I was going to rewrite our story, one where Evan and I were free, where he could draw his dragons without fear of judgment. My phone pinged, a draft from Sarah. I skimmed it, my heart racing. The headline was brutal, local charity star embroiled in financial scandal. The article laid it all bare, dates, numbers, the whistleblower's quotes. My name wasn't mentioned, but it didn't need to be. This was my work, my justice. I closed the laptop, my hands steady now. Tomorrow the world would see them for who they were. And I'd be there, watching, ready to protect Evan from the fallout, and to build something new in its place. The morning after the dinner, I woke to the soft glow of dawn filtering through my bedroom curtains, my laptop still open on the desk, Sarah's draft article staring back at me. My hands were steady as I reread the headline, local charity star embroiled in financial scandal, and the words that would unravel my family's carefully curated lies. Last night's declaration of disownment still echoed. Their voices, Mom's theatrical sigh, Dad's stern verdict, Lexi's venomous smirk, fueling the fire that had been burning since they'd hurt Evan. I'd walked out of their house, feeling the weight of their rejection, but Sarah's call had shifted everything. Now, as I sipped my coffee, the bitter taste grounding me, I was ready to face them one last time, not to beg, but to expose their hypocrisy, and walk away for good. My phone buzzed, a message from Sarah, story goes live at noon. You want to be there when they see it? I typed back, I'll handle it my way. I didn't need to see their faces when the article hit. I needed to confront them on my terms, in their space, where they felt untouchable. I dressed carefully, Black sweater, jeans, nothing to signal weakness, and drove to their house, the dossier tucked in my bag, a physical reminder of the truth I'd uncovered. Evan was at school, safe from this storm, and I'd asked Mrs. Carter to pick him up later. This moment was mine. I pulled into their driveway, the colonial house looking smaller in the daylight, less like a fortress and more like a facade. Mom answered the door, her face tightening when she saw me. "Erica, what are you doing here?" she asked, her voice clipped, her robe pristine despite the early hour. "We need to talk," I said, stepping past her without waiting for an invitation. She sputtered but followed me into the living room where Dad sat with his morning paper, glasses perched on his nose. Lexi was there too, sprawled on the couch, phone in hand, her eyes flicking up with a mix of surprise and disdain. "Wow, back already?" she said, smirking. "Miss us that much?" I set my bag down, my movements slow, deliberate, and pulled out the dossier, its weight familiar in my hand. "I'm not here to beg," I said, my voice calm but firm, like a blade sliding from its sheath. "I'm here to tell you the truth." Dad lowered his paper, his brow furrowing. "What's this about, Erica?" he asked, his tone heavy with the authority he thought he still had over me. I opened the dossier, pages fanning out on the coffee table. Screenshots, financial records, emails, the timeline of their cruelty. "This," I said, tapping the papers, "is who you really are." Mom's eyes widened, her hand fluttering to her chest. "What is this nonsense?" she demanded, but her voice wavered. I ignored her, turning to Lexi. "Your brand deals? Built on lies. You've been scamming your followers, and I have the receipts." Her smirk vanished, her phone slipping to her lap as she leaned forward, scanning the screenshots of her deleted comments, her fake endorsements. I turned to Mom. "Your charity? A front. Thousands missing, funneled to your accounts. There's a whistleblower, Mom. It's over." Her face paled, her lips parting, but no words came. Dad stood, his hands shaking. "You're out of line, Erica," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. I kept going, my voice steady, each word a hammer strike. "And you, Dad, you pressured people to cover for her, to prop up your perfect image, but it's all here, every email, every lie." I spread the pages out, letting them see the evidence, the proof of their hypocrisy. Lexi's voice broke the silence, shrill and panicked. "You can't do this, you'll ruin us." I met her eyes, unflinching. "You ruined yourselves," I said. "You hurt Evan, you hurt me, and you thought I'd just take it." Mom tried to rally, her voice rising. "We were trying to help you, Erica. You've always been so ungrateful." I cut her off, my hand raised. "Stop, you don't get to rewrite this. You disowned us last night, remember? You called Evan a burden. You don't get to play the victim now." The room went silent, the air thick with their shock. I saw it in their faces, Mom's trembling lip, Dad's clenched jaw, Lexi's wide, frantic eyes. They weren't untouchable anymore. They were exposed, and I was the one who'd done it. I gathered the dossier, tucking it back into my bag. "A journalist has this," I said, my voice low. "It's going live at noon. You can't stop it." Dad took a step toward me, his face red. "You'd destroy your own family?" he asked, his voice shaking. I looked at him, at the man who'd ignored my trophy at 16, who'd called my son a problem. "You're not my family," I said. "Evan is." I turned, walking to the door, my steps steady, my heart racing but light. As I reached for the knob, Lexi called out, "You're nothing without us, Erica." I didn't look back. "I'm everything without you," I said, and walked out. The door closed behind me, and I stood on their lawn, the sun warm on my face. My phone buzzed. Sarah again. "It's live." I didn't need to check. I could feel it, the shift, the truth breaking free. I drove home, picturing Evan's smile, his dragons, the life we'd build without their shadows. I'd exposed them, not for revenge, but for us, for freedom. The drive home from my parents' house felt like crossing a threshold. The weight of their shocked faces, Mom's trembling lip, Dad's clenched jaw, Lexi's panicked eyes, fading with each mile. The dossier was back in my bag, its pages lighter now, as if the truth I'd laid bare had lifted a burden I'd carried too long. Sarah's article was live, exposing their lies to the world, and I felt a quiet triumph, not in their ruin, but in our freedom. Evan's and mine. As I pulled into my driveway, the afternoon sun casting long shadows, I knew the next step wasn't about them anymore. It was about us, about the people who saw us for who we were. I grabbed my phone and texted Mrs. Carter, "Can I pick Evan up early? Want to spend some time with him." Her reply was instant. "Come over, he's drawing you another dragon." Walking to Mrs. Carter's house just a few doors down, I felt the knot in my chest loosen. Her small bungalow was the opposite of my parents' sterile mansion, cluttered with books, knitted blankets, and the faint smell of cinnamon from her baking. When she opened the door, her warm smile was a balm, so different from Mom's practice. "He's in the kitchen," she said, patting my arm. "Been talking about you all day." I stepped inside and there was Evan, sitting at her worn wooden table, crayons scattered, his tongue poking out as he colored a dragon with sapphire wings. My heart swelled. This was what mattered. "Mom!" Evan's face lit up and he held up his drawing, the dragon's eyes fierce but kind like his. I knelt beside him, brushing his hair back. "It's amazing, buddy," I said, my voice thick. Mrs. Carter set a mug of tea in front of me, her eyes soft. "He's been telling me how you're his hero," she said, her voice low so Evan wouldn't hear. I swallowed hard, looking at my son, his small hands moving with purpose. "He's mine," I said, echoing the words I'd whispered to him last night. We sat there, the three of us, in a warmth my parents' house never had. Mrs. Carter pulled out a plate of oatmeal cookies, still warm, and Evan grinned, grabbing one. "Tell Mom about the dragon's story," she prompted, and Evan launched into a tale about a dragon who protected a village from storms. His voice was steady, no trace of the stutter Lexi had mocked. I listened, nodding, my hand resting on his shoulder, feeling the strength in his small frame. This was what family felt like, not blood but choice, people who saw you, who celebrated you. Mrs. Carter leaned closer, her voice quiet. "You okay, Erica? You seem different today." I glanced at her, her kind eyes searching mine, and felt a rush of gratitude. She'd been there for us, watching Evan, bringing us soup when we were sick, never judging. "I'm okay," I said, my voice steady. "Better than okay." I didn't tell her about the article, the dossier, the confrontation. Not yet, but I felt the weight of it lift, replaced by this moment, Evan's laughter, the cookie crumbs on his shirt, Mrs. Carter's quiet support. As Evan drew, I thought of my parents' dining room, the cold candlelight, their cutting words. That world felt distant now, like a memory I could finally let go. Here, in this cluttered kitchen, I was seen. Evan was seen. I remembered Lexi's sneer, calling him a burden, and contrasted it with Mrs. Carter's smile as she handed him another crayon. My parents had chosen their image over us, but I'd chosen better. People who loved Evan for his dragons, his quiet strength, his heart. We stayed for an hour, Evan finishing his drawing while I sipped tea, chatting with Mrs. Carter about her garden, the weather, normal things that felt extraordinary after the storm of the morning. When it was time to go, Evan hugged her, his small arms tight around her waist. "Thanks for the cookies," he said, and she ruffled his hair. "Anytime, kiddo." As we walked home, his hand in mine, he swung his sketchbook, humming. "Can we hang this dragon up?" he asked. "Right next to the others?" I nodded, my throat tight. "Front and center," I said. Back home, I taped his drawing to the living room wall, the sapphire dragon joining the others, a gallery of his imagination. I stood back, looking at it, and felt a peace I hadn't known in years. My family, my blood family, had tried to erase us, but they'd failed. Here with Evan's drawings, Mrs. Carter's cookies, the life we were building, we were whole. The article was out there doing its work, but this moment, this warmth, was my victory. Not their ruin, but our rise. The morning after our visit with Mrs. Carter, I woke to the soft patter of rain against the windows, a gentle rhythm that matched the calm settling over me. Evan was still asleep, his sketchbook open on his nightstand, the sapphire dragon peeking out from the pages. My phone buzzed relentlessly, notifications from Sarah's article, which had gone viral overnight, shared across local news sites and social media. Comments poured in, calling out Mom's charity, Lexi's fake influencer life, Dad's complicity. My family's perfect facade was crumbling, and I felt no guilt, only resolve. They tried to erase Evan and me, but I wasn't done yet. Today, I needed to build a fortress around us to ensure they could never hurt us again. That meant setting boundaries, hard, unbreakable ones, and making it clear we were no longer theirs to wound. I sat at the kitchen table, a notepad in front of me, and started drafting a letter. Not an email, not a text, something formal, something they couldn't ignore. My pen moved steadily, each word deliberate. To my parents and Lexi, you made your choice when you disowned us. Evan and I are done. No contact, no visits, no place in our lives. My hand shook as I wrote, Not with doubt, but with the weight of cutting ties so completely. I listed their actions: Mom's neglect, Dad's judgment, Lexi's cruelty, tying each to specific moments like the dinner where they called Evan a burden, the barbecue where Lexi mocked his stutter. It wasn't emotional venting. It was a legal line in the sand, a warning that I'd protect Evan at all costs. As I wrote, my phone lit up with a voicemail from Mom. Her voice was shrill, panicked. "Erica, how could you do this? That article, it's lies. You've ruined us." I deleted it without replying, my heart steady. Another call came, Lexi this time. I let it go to voicemail, her voice dripping with venom. "You're pathetic, Erica. You think this makes you better than us?" I deleted that too. They were scrambling, just as I'd expected, but their words held no power anymore. I finished the letter, signed it, and drove to the post office, mailing certified copies to each of them. The act felt final, like locking a door I'd never reopen. Back home, I turned my attention to Evan's safety. I called his school, speaking with his teacher, Miss Rivera, a kind woman who'd always encouraged his creativity. "I need to make sure no one from my family picks him up," I said, explaining just enough estrangement their behavior without mentioning the article. Ms. Rivera's voice was firm. "I've got you, Erica. Evan's safe here." I thanked her, my throat tight, and updated the school's records, listing Mrs. Carter as the only other authorized person. Every step felt like laying bricks, building a wall between us and them. Next, I contacted a lawyer I'd met through the community center, a woman named Carla who specialized in family law. Over coffee at a small cafe, I laid out the situation: my family's disownment, their history of emotional abuse, the article exposing their lies. I slid a copy of the dossier across the table, watching her eyes widen as she flipped through it. "You've got a case for a restraining order if they push back," she said, her voice calm but serious. "But this letter you sent, it's a strong start. Legally it shows intent to sever contact." I nodded, relief washing over me. "I just want Evan safe," I said. She reached across, squeezing my hand. "He will be." That afternoon I picked Evan up from school, his backpack bouncing as he ran to me, a new drawing in hand, a dragon with golden scales guarding a castle. "This one's for us," he said, grinning. I hugged him, my heart full, and we drove home, rain streaking the windows. As he colored at the kitchen table, I checked my phone. No more calls from my family, just a text from Sarah. "They're imploding, you okay?" I replied, "Better than ever." And I meant it. The boundaries I'd set, the letter, the school, the lawyer, were my fortress, not just keeping them out, but locking our new life in. As evening fell, I sat with Evan, watching him draw, his small hands steady, his face peaceful. The rain outside softened, and I felt the same shift inside me. My family's world was falling apart, but ours was just beginning. I'd cut them off, not out of hate, but out of love, for Evan, for the life we deserved. The dossier had done its job, but this moment, this quiet, was my strength. The rain had stopped by morning, leaving the air fresh and the world outside my kitchen window gleaming with new light. Evan was at the table, his crayons spread out, adding details to his golden dragon, the one guarding our castle. I watched him, my coffee mug warm in my hands, and felt a quiet strength settling in my chest. The article had done its work. My family's reputation was in tatters, their calls and texts had stopped, and the boundaries I'd set were holding firm. But this wasn't about their downfall anymore. It was about building something new, a legacy for Evan and me that wasn't tied to their name or their poison. Today, I was ready to start reshaping our story, to create a world where Evan's joy was the foundation, not their judgment. I opened my laptop, the screen glowing with an email I'd been drafting for weeks, one I hadn't had the courage to finish until now. It was to the community center's director proposing a new program, a workshop for kids like Evan, sensitive and creative, who needed a space to feel seen. I'd been running parenting workshops there for years, but this was different, personal. I typed out the details: art-based activities, storytelling sessions, a focus on building confidence through creativity. I pictured Evan's dragons, his pride when he showed them to me, and I wanted other kids to feel that too. My fingers moved quickly, the words flowing, each one a brick in the new legacy I was building. As I hit send, my phone buzzed, a reply from Sarah, the journalist. "People are reaching out, Erica. Parents, kids, even donors who were scammed. They want to talk to you." I leaned back, my heart racing. The article hadn't just exposed my family, it had sparked something bigger. I called Sarah, my voice steady but excited. "What do they want?" I asked. She laughed, a warm sound. "They're inspired. Some want to share their stories, others want to help. You've started a movement." A movement. The word felt too big, but it lit something in me. I wasn't just protecting Evan, I was creating a space for others to heal too. I spent the morning making calls, connecting with a local art teacher who'd read the article and wanted to volunteer for the workshop. "Kids like your son need this," she said, her voice earnest. "I've got supplies, paint, canvases, let's make it happen." By noon, I had a meeting set with the community center's director, who loved the proposal and offered a small grant to get it started. I hung up, my hands trembling with possibility. This wasn't just a program, it was a way to redefine what family meant, to build a community that celebrated kids like Evan, not tore them down. When Evan came home from school, his backpack slung over one shoulder, I told him about the workshop. "It's a place where kids can draw and tell stories like you," I said, sitting across from him at the table. His eyes lit up. "Can I bring my dragons?" he asked, already flipping through his sketchbook. "They're the stars," I said, grinning. He hugged me, his small arms tight, and I felt tears prick my eyes. This was it, the legacy I wanted. Not my parents' name, but not their charity galas or Lexi's Instagram fame, but this. Evan's joy, his confidence, shared with others. That evening, I took him to the community center, where we met the art teacher, Miss Lena, a woman with bright earrings and a warm laugh. She knelt beside Evan, admiring his dragon drawings. "You're a natural," she said, and he beamed, his shoulders straightening. We walked through the space, a small room with big windows, perfect for painting and storytelling. I could see it already, kids laughing, creating, feeling safe. As we left, Evan slipped his hand in mine. "This is gonna be awesome, Mom," he said. I squeezed his hand, my heart full. "Yeah, buddy, it is." Later, as I tucked him into bed, his golden dragon now taped to his wall, I looked at the others, emerald, sapphire, crimson, all fierce, all his. My family had tried to make him small, but here he was, shining. I'd reclaimed our story not by destroying them, but by building something better. The community center, the workshop, the kids we'd help. It was our name now, our legacy. Written in Evan's colors, his courage, our love. The morning light filtered through Evan's bedroom window, casting a soft glow on his wall of dragons, each one a testament to his imagination, his strength. I sat on the edge of his bed watching him sleep, his sketchbook open beside him, a half-finished dragon in bold purples and blues. The past week had been a whirlwind. The article exposing my family's lies, the confrontation, the boundaries I'd set, the workshop I'd started. Their world had crumbled, but ours was rising, built on Evan's joy and the community we were creating. As I brushed a lock of hair from his forehead, I felt a quiet peace settle over me, a realization that my worth, and Evan's, wasn't tied to their approval. It never had been. I stood, tiptoeing out to the kitchen, where my laptop waited. The community center's director had emailed me last night, confirming the workshop's first session next week. Parents were already signing up, drawn by the article's ripple effect. Stories of kids like Evan, sensitive and creative, needing a space to thrive. I opened a new document, jotting down ideas for the first session. Dragon-themed art, storytelling prompts, a hero's journey activity to make every kid feel unstoppable. My hands moved steadily, no longer trembling with the anger or fear that had driven me for so long. This was different. Purpose, not revenge. As I worked, memories of the past months flickered through my mind. The nights spent building the dossier, the dinner where they'd disowned us, the moment I'd walked out of their house, head high. I'd thought exposing them would be the victory. But sitting here, planning a future for Evan and other kids, I saw the truth. The real win was this life, our life, free from their shadows. I didn't need their validation to know I was enough. Evan's smile, his dragons, the community we were building, it was proof of that. My phone buzzed, a text from Miss Lena, the art teacher. "Got more supplies donated. Kids are gonna love this." I smiled, replying, "You're amazing, see you tomorrow." I leaned back, my coffee gone cold, and looked around our small home. It wasn't perfect, dishes in the sink, crayons scattered on the table, but it was ours, filled with love, not judgment. I thought of my parents' sterile mansion, Lexi's curated Instagram life, and felt no envy, only relief. They'd chosen their path, I'd chosen mine. Evan shuffled into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes, his hair a mess. "Morning, Mom," he mumbled, climbing into a chair. I pushed a plate of toast toward him, ruffling his hair. "Morning, buddy. Got any new dragon ideas?" He grinned, grabbing a crayon from the table. "A silver one. It flies to the moon." I laughed, listening as he spun a story, his voice bright, no trace of the fear he'd shown at my parents' house. That boy, the one they'd called a burden, was my world, and I'd built a world for him. As he drew, I thought about the journey we'd taken. I'd spent years chasing their approval, twisting myself to fit their mold. But standing up to them, exposing their lies, wasn't about proving them wrong, it was about proving myself right. I was a good mother. A strong woman, someone who could turn pain into purpose. Evan didn't need their name, he had mine, and I'd make it mean something. Love, creativity, resilience. I closed my laptop, joining Evan at the table, picking up a crayon to add stars to his silver dragon's sky. "Looks like it's ready to soar," I said, and he nodded, his eyes shining. So were we. The peace I felt wasn't loud or triumphant, it was quiet, steady, rooted in the truth that we were enough, just as we were. Have you ever had to walk away from someone who made you feel small, to build a life that's truly yours? That's been my journey. Breaking free from my family's toxicity to create a world where Evan and I can shine. I'm sharing this story because I know I'm not alone and I want to hear yours. Drop a comment below. Tell me about a time you chose yourself or someone you love over someone else's judgment. If my journey resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear that it's okay to define success on their own terms. You don't need anyone's permission to be enough. You already are. Let's keep building that truth together.